Yep. Okay.
Maybe if you put the phone over there.
Pardon me. Yep. Well, hi there, everybody. This is Pat Mesiti here, and today's an exciting day. And thank you everyone tuning in from all over the world, actually, not just Australia, and on Truth and Treachery. And today, I want to start by sharing with you in the Second World War. I think it was President Roosevelt had a challenge. America wasn't involved in the war until Japan invaded Pearl Harbor. The situation was that he had the Germans on one side, the Japanese on the other side, and of course America in the middle. But he also had differences with the likes of Henry Ford and Kaiser and Boeing. But he went to them and said this. He said, look, I know you and I have got differences of opinion, and it doesn't matter what you think of me or what I think of you. But I need to build a war machine lest the freedoms that we have will be taken from us. And the factories that you guys have built and the millions you have created from you.
Five.
So they joined forces together. They joined forces together. And it's for the greater good of the freedoms of the United States of America. They did a war machine. And we're just having a few challenges with one of the Skype issues, so just bear with me. So they built the war machine.
Hang on.
And of course, we know rest is history.
2 bars, okay.
War machine that was forwarded to the Western world. And today we've got two guys. They represent two political parties, but of course they've got one mission in common, and that's the freedom of Australia. And I want to welcome to the program one of our good friends, Senator Malcom Roberts. Great to have you on, Senator Malcom, again. Great to see you again.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Good to be with both you and Alex.
Oh, we've got your back. We've got your back on air live. That good-looking face. Look at that blonde hair of yours. I'm telling you, Malcolm. And of course, a gentleman that I met just a few weeks ago in Adelaide, Alex Antic. And I tell you, Alex, thank you for doing the bravest thing. You're a national hero. Both of you, in my opinion, are national treasures. Crossing the floor on Monday over that bill. So I just want to ask you guys, how are you feeling right now after Monday? Alex, if you want to share on that, how do you feel?
Oh, look, thanks, Pat. It's great to be here. It's great to be here, talking with you this afternoon. I have to say, I mean, they're interesting times we're living in at the moment. They really are. And look, at the moment, I'm still hopeful. I think I'm hoping this is a little blip on our radar and on a national, level, on state level. But it does need action. And, I have said for a long time when this pandemic began that I was worried about the trajectory. There's an age-old maxim about giving powers to the bureaucracy and then not giving them back or not getting them back. And I think that's played out right in front of our eyes. We saw it in my state of South Australia. We saw that very early on. The patterns happened all across the country where the state parliament divested itself almost of powers under the various emergency management acts. And there's just this natural inclination for the bureaucracy to just keep take. And that's exactly what we've seen. And of course, the line keeps moving. The impositions on freedom and liberty keep getting taken. So I think the sort of thing that we had on Monday is necessary. I'd hoped and argued for a government version of that, but One Nation put a bill up, and there were 5 of us. I think there were 7 in total, including Malcolm and Pauline. And of course, it was their bill. But 5 additional senators from my side of the fence crossed the floor and voted with it. And I did so absolutely comfortably. I think the intent of the bill was right. At the moment we are legislating, or we've introduced a bill about religious discrimination. We've done so based on the external affairs power, I think, under the one of the treaties there. And that was the very same power that was relied on in this bill. I think people need protection from discrimination. This is a very simple issue, and so I'm looking for other ways that we can do that, and that's probably why we're here tonight.
Absolutely. I'm going to get to that religious discrimination in a second, but Senator Malcom Roberts, when they should introduce the bill, what would that bill have represented for every Australian? And I say every Australian, not the two-tiered Australia, not the ones that have got the shot, ones that have not got the shot. What would that bill have meant if it had got through for all of Australia?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. You've said that it would unify Australians, basically, by implication for what you said. Instead of having the uninjected and the injected, we would have Australians again, and that's so important. We would have free Australians again. We would have Australians able to have their choice as to whether or not they got injected. As it is now, people are being coerced into it. So that's the straight answer to your question. It would unify Australia. The second thing I'd like to say is I want to thank Alex for his support. Alex, Jared, Sam McMahon, Matt Canavan, and Connie Fierravanti-Wells. And you'll notice they're all from the Liberal Nationals.
Yeah.
I hope I don't offend Alex by saying this after I've just thanked him, but there's very little difference between the Liberal Nationals and the Labor Greens. And the Labor Greens, let's face it, they're Labor Green, aren't they, Alec? They're tied in. They were in the coalition together last time, and that's how they'll work next time.
No doubt.
Yeah.
So they're after control, Pat, and what you'll find in the Liberal Nationals, even though I don't like their policies, you'll find some people like Alex there, some people like Jared Rennick. There is no chance of that in the Labor Greens. They are a tight, authoritarian bunch. Now, to also answer your earlier question, I'm feeling quite hopeful right now, because even though our bill got knocked back, we've seen protests all over the country, and not just little protests. These are monster protests. We've also seen Pauline Hanson go up to Yeppoon in central Queensland and address the small business forum with about 400 people in the room, mainly small business people, and councillors from the Livingston Shire Council, Regional Council. And she spoke so well. And the next day, I think, the councillors moved a motion in Livingston Shire or Livingston Region, and they voted to not impose the ban on businesses, not impose the discrimination on businesses. That was the first check. Then the next couple of days later, Fraser Coast, and then yesterday a couple of days later, Fraser Coast, and then Banana Shire, and there's another shire now talking about it. I'm disappointed that down your way, Tom Tate won't even address a meeting that he's been invited to. But anyway, there's some hope there that. Yeah. And even Dan Andrews had to move because the CFMEU rank and file beat it into them, So
I'm not a big fan of the Labor Greens, and I'm telling people, and right now, with all due respect to Alex, I'm not being a great friend of men that I really supported before, Scott Morrison. What I found intriguing was on November 19, article appeared in Sydney Morning Herald, and then, of course, right across Australia, that he says governments need to relinquish control of the people and they need to give them back their freedoms. He did a William Wallace, put on his war paint, came out there riding on his horse, freedom. And when we looked under the kilt, there was nothing there. And why would the why would the Prime Minister give us such hope on Thursday and Friday and then chop our legs from under us, which is what he's been doing for the last 18 months. Now, that's what I see. Can any of you enlighten me on that, please?
Well, let me try, Pat. I'll give it a go. Look, I have to say that those comments I believe are genuine. The Prime Minister ultimately believes that. I mean, he believes the government should be out of people's lives, and we have to remember that the mandates largely are an operation of state parliaments, as we just talked about. They basically come from the various emergency management acts and the powers that have been given. In South Australia, it's all about public health directions that have been given under the Act. So one of the great difficulties for the Commonwealth government is what it can actually do. The ability to override mandates at Commonwealth level is not clear and not apparent. Which is why, in my view, we needed something like the bill that Malcolm and Pauline put up on Monday, which was simply a discrimination act. So the ability to stop the state governments from directing people in certain jobs, whether it's nurses or dentists, and of course now that field is blowing out into the most unreasonable categories of people that, there is just no science to it. But the ability for the Commonwealth Government is hard. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't things that can be done. Those are the things that I'm trying to explore at the moment. I think there are things that can be done, and I think there are levers to pull through a work in progress. Having said that, so I think, it is difficult because the Prime Minister's only got so many angles on this. It's actually what this has done this little period, I think, and Malcolm might agree with this or be able to even expand on it, is it's shown up the issue of federation, I think, for the first time in a long time in a very clear way. We really haven't had an incident for so long that's shown up how powerful the states are. And they do have a lot of power. And I think we're seeing that with the mandates. And so it's a challenging and frustrating exercise. But I will say, I do believe the Prime Minister, when he says what he says, we've just got to find, in my view, a way to help.
Malcolm?
So I don't agree with Alex. I don't think, insofar as Scott Morrison, Alex, I don't agree that he's sincere. I don't believe that he's trustworthy. The Commonwealth Government can legislate. All they had to do was adopt Pauline Hanson's bill. That would have ended it. That would have ended all the mandates right then and there. I think what he was doing last Thursday, he was testing the air. See, he was just going like that and seeing what would happen. He talked in he's a very effective communicator. He talked in terms of Queenslanders should get a cup of coffee. Okay, he was testing to see whether or not there was support for that. That's gutless. And he's been dishonest all the way through this campaign. Look, the National Cabinet was his creation. It's a bogus, it's not a scam, but it doesn't have any teeth. Anastasia Palaszczuk, when she introduced her December 17th order, separating injected from non-injected, she said that it's in line with the National Cabinet. That's Scott Morrison's purview. The mandates, the state mandates, can only be implemented if they get the federal health department's data that enables them to check injection status. So the Commonwealth Government is enabling that. We also learned a couple of days ago that Air Services, which is a federal government air arm, they're requiring all their employees to be injected. So the federal government is doing this, contrary to the Constitution. But the Commonwealth Government could come up with a solution just by adopting Senator Hanson's bill. So they're being duplicitous at the high levels of this country.
The great thing is, you know what, that people like Alex cross the floor, and we commend you for that. As a great act. It was a great act of,
yes.
A great act of, I believe, you could see the heart for Australia by that act. Can I ask this question? Because one of the Labor guys got up and made a comment to Scott Morrison. I can't remember his name, but every time it opens his mouth, it's like he's advertising his own stupidity. But I'll...
that could be a number of people, Pat.
My great mentor, Mr. Daniels, used to say to me in board meetings, always used to say to people, stop advertising your ignorance in public. And this guy said, ask the Prime Minister in question time, was he supportive of the extremist bill pushed out by One Nation? To which the Prime Minister went, no. And that was it. Now, question I have. How much do you guys believe there was the fear of, hey, we've got the 70-80% jab, they're going to get mad at us at election time and not vote for us if we make it equal for all? How much of that fear would have been in that room on all sides of the political parties?
Are you talking about in Parliament? Or
Yeah, how many of those guys in Parliament, if we vote for this, the 80% are going to get mad at us because we told them to do it and they did it, or we forced them to do it and they did it. So we're only going to worry about the little minorities over here like Mesiti and everybody else, and Antic and Roberts. We're going to worry about them. How much of that paranoia and fear would have been prevalent on all sides of the political parties?
Look, it's hard to know. I mean, Pat, I think one of the things that's really interesting about this is how this is so cross-party political, this issue. One of the things that struck me about the Freedom Rally in Adelaide, there's a big crowd in Adelaide, by the way. We had about 20,000 people there now for a small city. And I know you were there the other week, Pat. You could testify to this. It's a very small, middle city, a great city though, I might say. But that is a big crowd in SA. Now, I think we've heard, all across the country, these people who were there are being described as extremists, as right-wing lunatics, as anti-vaxxers. Well, let me tell you, I was there, and I'm sure Malcolm can tell the same story up north. These were concerned Australians, people worried about their jobs, worried about their futures. But the other thing that struck me was there was not a consistent race, colour, presumably religion, and presumably voting pattern as well. I mean, I would guess, and you can never judge a book by its cover, but I would guess you had a broad spectrum of political views in that park that day. So I think it is a difficult issue for people, but I'll tell you this much. I think it's a growing issue. I think it's an increasing issue out there. I think the groundswell is real. I mean, we're talking about, and depends who you believe, but we're talking about in the order of 500,000 Australians on the streets last weekend. I don't think this is an issue that politics can ignore anymore. I'm not sure politics has sniffed the wind on this one yet, some aspects of it. And I think the movement is growing.
Yeah, Pat, what I would say is you asked for the view in Parliament itself. The Greens are interested in one thing and one thing only: control. It's not an environmental movement, it's a control movement, and we know that. They're the foot soldiers of the UN. They bring in policies to steal property rights, destroy energy, control land use, control water, control resources. That's all they're interested in. They are they're very strongly adamant that they need to control and get people injected. That's it, the Greens. And they're losing support because some of their own people are saying this is not right. They're stunned. They're stunned. Now, the Labor Party, sheep. They used to be, in my opinion, the party in say 40, 50 years ago, you could admire, maybe 70 years ago, you could admire the Labor Party because they genuinely, while they might have been misguided in terms of being socialist, at least they were genuine in their beliefs that was best for the country. That's not the case. They're a rabble now. They're a mismatch. They don't know what the hell they're doing. The Liberal Nationals, we got a count down in Canberra. Someone in Canberra counted us. The vote in Parliament, in the Senate, was 7. 5 actually, but plus we two. And the other count was way short of 68, way short of 68. 25 people did not enter the chamber to vote. They hid in their offices, right? And so what that tells you is there's a lot, and Alex is exactly right. There's a lot of people saying the wind is changing here, but they weren't game enough to come out straight away. But think about this. Another thing that Alex, I agree with, he told us all how unified the protesters were in Adelaide, same around the country. But here's another big thing that says they're unified. A huge number, a huge proportion of the protesters are double injected. They're not there because they're opposed to the injection. Correct. They're opposed to the coercion. Now, these are rough figures, and no one's done a survey, but 40% of people want the injection, and they've got it. 40% of people say, to hell with that, I don't want it, but I've got to do it to keep my livelihood, put food on the table. They resent this. 20% are saying, go to hell, never going to touch it. So you've got that split there. So the 40% in the middle, they want freedom. That's their number one issue. You can talk to them at these protests. They say, I'm double injected, but I want freedom. And I want to be double injected, but I want you to have freedom. So that's what the issue is about. It's about freedom now. And the other thing, Pat, is whenever they label people, whether it be anti-vaxxers or racists or misogynists or misandrists, whatever it is, you can just respond to them by saying, thank you for admitting you haven't got an argument, because otherwise you wouldn't have used the label. That's it.
Do you know, I often say to people, look, my friends don't need an explanation and my enemies aren't going to believe me anyway. Which one are you? But, you know, for me, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. People say that I am. I'm anti-this. I'm anti-this. And we put, oh, you're anti. I'm vax hesitant. I'm not anti. And when people say to me, oh, but you got measles, I said, yeah, but that was trialed over a long period of time. We are the trial. So, and when they use labels like that, I find that very discriminatory. Now, I'll get to that in a minute with the religious discrimination watered down the woke bill. I'll get to that in a minute. But why does the government, I mean, you know, if you would ask us 3 years ago, who's the state premier of Queensland, Victoria, South Australia, people would go, I don't know. Now they're television personalities. They're like, you know, they're like the Kardashians almost of the 11 o'clock. Are they milking this? And why do they need to keep the paranoia going? Those that wanted to be vaccinated by now would have been vaccinated. Those that were coerced to. I honestly, I get hammered every day from people that just crying because they went against their conscience. And I tell people, conscience is the echo of God in your soul. And when people are forced to do things against their conscience, they won't forget that. My question to you, gentlemen, is why do they want to keep the paranoia going?
Well, I'll go with that one first, Pat, if you like. Look, I don't know. I mean, I think by any stretch of the imagination, it doesn't make sense. Even the Doherty modelling says, I think at 80%, it's kind of done. I don't know about the issue of paranoia, but I do know that what we've got from what we said earlier on is a bureaucracy that are risk averse. I think we see that. There's really no skin in the game for health bureaucrats in this area because when I used to practice in the law, and I always remember the dilemma you used to get into when you needed to hire an expert for one of your legal cases. They're a very costly exercise. Sometimes the difference wasn't much in terms of the result, but if you didn't recommend it, you get criticised later on for not having done everything you can, even though there was a dollar figure in it. It's a bit like that here, I think. You know, what we've got here is bureaucrats that don't have any concept of what it's like to run a business, what it's like to go through being the arbiters. You know, they're almost, poor business people now are almost the Praetorian Guard for this pandemic. They got to check QR codes. They're now checking vaccine passports. They got to make sure you got your mask on. They got to do all their compliance. So the bureaucrats have outsourced all of that. And I think ultimately what you get when you sit around a table with health bureaucrats is a series of ideas. No one's ever keen enough to say, I think we've had enough, you know, that's too much. That's going to cost people money. We can't do that. They take the path of least resistance and do what will pursue this zero COVID strategy that we drifted into after 2 weeks to flatten the curve, if you remember. So I think, look, I'm not sure it's about keeping the paranoia up. I think it's more about this really builds the cat on the difference between private enterprise and bureaucracy. One's accountable to the bottom line. You know, one has real world pressures and the other just does whatever it wants in fantasy land. And I think that's what we're seeing, in my view.
Senator Roberts?
Yeah, I think Alex is on the money for part of it, a big part of it. These things can be explained by human foibles. That's basically what Alex is saying as I read it. Alex and I and several other people were this morning on a Zoom meeting with some very prominent international scientists and Senator Ron Johnson, who's done a marvelous job in the States. And, you know, they said a number of things. They said that what quite often happens in politics is it goes to the lowest common denominator. So whoever's got the safest policy, and I use safe loosely there, it's a fabrication, but because we've done anything that but safe in the way we've managed it. We should be looking to Taiwan. We should be looking to the use of, I won't mention it in case you get banned, but the Iver medicine. There are whole kinds of
to Stephanie in the community.
We can use. So we're not doing anything that's safe, but we're going to the lowest common denominator. And then the politicians are afraid of releasing those because if something happens in their state, they'll get blamed for it, and they don't want to do that. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's been a completely mismanaged show, and politicians are afraid to admit errors. So, you know, I think it's far better to admit an error if we've made an error. The third thing, it comes back to Alex, what Alex was saying. They're timid in some ways, and if you look at the instruments they're using, Pat, they're control. Correct. Always beneath control, there is fear. Always. They're afraid of making a mistake. They're afraid of looking stupid. But there's also another angle, and that is that people can't believe what's happened in Australia. And I can't believe it. It's stunning. And I can't believe how impotent we are in the Senate. You know, we can do a few things, and we're building the pressure. But the other thing is, it's not just Australia. We hear of reports on Fox News that Americans are aghast at what's happening here. Hang on, it's happening in America. It's happening in Britain. It's happening in countries in Europe. It's happening all over the world. I mean, you know, it used to be 2 weeks to flatten the curve, as Alex said. It's now three injections to freedom, and then it's 4 injections. So that's happening in Israel, and it's even happening in some very sensibly run countries. So it's a combination of things, but there's no doubt there is a global agenda going on here. The parallels with the climate change and other things that the UN pushing, the World Economic Forum is pushing, are very, very clear. But the majority of Australian bureaucrats, Australian politicians are not aware of those global things. They're falling into line. But, you know...
It's interesting, gentlemen. You know, I've been around. We had a great rally, indoor rally with church in Adelaide, and that's where I met Alex on the Monday. On the Sunday night, it was absolutely jam-packed. Monday morning, jam-packed. We were in Bow Desert on the weekend. You couldn't move in the building on the Sunday night and Sunday morning. People are rallying together, whether they're jabbed, not jabbed, under this cause of freedom, and that gives us hope. My concern, as you probably heard my rants, is I take a leaf out of Abraham Lincoln's book when he said, "To sin by silence when we should protest makes cowards of men." One of my big issues is the silence of the church, and it annoys me. It just annoys me. I don't think Tim Costello helped with the End COVID for All scenario that he created through the Micah Group, the 55 million that was handed out. When I look at what's happening in places like Fiji and everything, it's a great concern because Australia was involved with them. Let me ask you, today in Parliament, there was a religious freedom bill, and this is what our Prime Minister said. It's about freedom of faith, and it's about freedom to protect you from discrimination. I wanted to add, except if you are unvaccinated. Now, what happens if my conscience says don't do that? Now, you know, obviously there's different views theologically on different things. You know, I certainly don't believe that the vax is the mark of the beast or anything like that, but it's a pretty good prototype. And we'll leave that alone. It's a pretty good prototype with the whole coercion thing. You know, without this, you can't move, you can't sell, you can't buy. And I had some pastors say to me, well, when we get to that point, we'll start making a noise. I said, if you can't defend me against the little Philistines, why would I trust you with a Goliath? You know. So my question I want to ask is, what was this watered down freedom of religion bill that I read today? It looked to me that it came straight out of Woketopia. Can anyone enlighten me on that one?
Malcolm, do you want to kick that one off? I've gone first the last couple of times. I feel like I'm flogging it.
Picked the wrong one to get me to lead off. The laws have
clause. They removed the allow clause, where you got a young guy put up a Bible verse, and he gets hammered and blamed on everything. But then you got other guys up there shooting cocaine up their nose, and they're allowed some sort of redemption. I'm confused here, being as former director of a drug rehab program, how that works. But anyway, Malcolm, can you help me on this one?
Well, I can give you. I haven't seen the bill, so I haven't read it. We haven't even got a draft yet, so that's I can't comment in detail. I did have a Zoom meeting with the Anglican, what's the second in charge, Bishop of Brisbane, and a legal advisor who was there also as a Christian, okay, wearing two hats, not just his legal opinion. And they said, while they're disappointed with the allow provisions not being in there and a couple of other things, they're happy with it overall, but it's a kind of benign happiness. It's a good first step, and they're hoping that in 2 years' time, when their review of the bill is done, they'll be able to put some more in there. Now, I don't think that's a good way to start, but anyway, they also spoke very strongly on behalf of every religion, not just the Christian denominations, but the Muslims, the Jews, the Hindus. Everyone is apparently happy with it, okay with it, but they're not excited by it. So there are limitations, as I understand it. That's coming from these two people who've read the whole lot. The government has consulted with them widely on this, all the faiths, and apparently everyone is okay with it, not rapturous, but that's the decision apparently.
Question. Can the state overrule the federal bill, as in the case of what Dictator Dan is doing in Melbourne under the Equal Opportunities Bill, where churches or church schools are negated the right to their own management? Now, how does that work? I mean, can you help me with that, Alex?
Yeah, I can. And look, I think Malcolm's summary there is right. I think this bill, in my mind, is always going to be a compromise in the sense that I don't like the discrimination bill frameworks, oddly, even though we were dealing with the COVID one earlier in the week. I mean, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need them. So I think they're always a bit of a compromise. We've seen how they can be weaponized, like the Racial Discrimination Act, Section 18C, and, so they can have two sides. What this is trying to do is, as the Prime Minister said, be a shield, not a sword. With Section 18C being an example of a sword, being used to attack people. What this is trying to do is actually protect. Now, look, once again, to go back to my time in the law, we used to say to clients when they would come in a mediation, we know when you've got a good result because everyone walks out unhappy. It sort of feels a little bit like this. Now, that's a sort of not a perfect thing to say, but unfortunately, the nature of this is always difficult because there are people like myself who would have wanted, I think, some of those clauses in. I think the flower clause probably should be in. I would also have liked to have seen the bill override some of the conversion therapy laws that are skating around now as well. It doesn't do that. But what it does do in this incarnation is have a clause in there about the sort of things you were talking about, which is the hire and fire type scenarios. Many of the state parliaments at the moment, South Australia hasn't done it yet, but is planning to at some stage, have amended their Equal Opportunity Acts to remove the ability for faith-based organisations, churches, hospitals, schools, to hire and fire based on their principles. This bill will provide some cover to that. There's some sort of procedural issues that are in there. The organisation needs to have a statement publicly available, so you can set out exactly what it is. So you can't just pluck something out of left field and then sack someone or not hire them or whatever. So it is trying to maintain a nice balance. I'm a bit the same. I'm sort of, it's a sort of a 70 or 80 page document. It takes a bit of time to soak it all up, and I've only just started that as well. But the basic tenets are there. It's trying to protect people from religious discrimination. So that's what it does.
I concur, and I love the concept of it. My question is, when I look at this, when the Prime Minister made that statement about it's a shield, not a sword, I go straight to David and Goliath, and Goliath had a guy carrying his shield to protect Goliath. So, because that shield was pretty big. What my question is, does this protection protect me from the Goliaths of a Dan and a Palaszczuk that can walk in and override a federal bill? That's my question.
Yeah, and the intention is that it will on some things. So, for example, that hire and fire clause, it will. I think Malcolm's quite right, though. I think one of the things we need to bear in mind here is politics is the art of the possible. We've got to get this through the parliament. We've got to get it through, at some stage. It's better to have it than not, and then it can always be amended. It can always be watered down as well, but that comes back to the issue of having good people in parliament. So the answer is yes, it does. Not in every aspect, but it protects from state governments on some levels.
Pat, my understanding, when I met with the bishop yesterday, I was in company of another legal expert. He's in my staff team, and he just told me that if laws are similar, we know this from Section 109 of the Constitution, if laws are similar at state level to Commonwealth, the Commonwealth prevails. Okay, that's it. So it gives protection exactly as Alex just said. But what my advisor said was that if the premiers make a policy decision or an administrative decision, then that's not picked up by Section 109 of the Constitution. It doesn't prevail. So that's untested, as I understand it, Alex. It's conjecture. Yeah. Most people are saying, apparently, the prevailing conclusion is that that would not be covered by Section 109. So it depends what happens, Pat. But in most circumstances, I think Alex is right. It would cover it.
Yeah. Look, I'll get off this subject before I get myself into trouble. But to me, when I look at what the Prime Minister did, he's campaigning, because he knows. And I know the people he knows that helped put that together. I know them. I'm looking at this as him campaigning. And to me, I think he pulled it out at the last minute because of the pressure that was put on him by certain Christian leaders from Woketopia. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. I would like to think it's protecting people. I have my final comments on that to both of you. I would like to think so. honestly, I just can't trust anything that comes out of his mouth at the moment. I really can't, and it breaks my heart because that's someone that I supported. But final say on this one before I ask some questions back to the COVID stuff.
I just want to say on that one, we've got to remember on this one, Pat, this has been going for a while. I mean, this goes back to about 2017. It goes back to the same-sex marriage debate where, effectively Parliament sort of promised to provide this, and there was the Ruddock review, and it went through and it has been consulted almost to the point of being over. We had 2 different exposure drafts. Everyone that could possibly comment has. So there has been a long run up. We've also had the interruptions of the last 2 years. I don't think this is a sort of a last minute election push. It was an election promise, so it's got to get through in this Parliament.
Yeah.
And look, I think it'll do. It'll do a good job. And we always want things. Both sides want things, but sometimes we've got to just find something that works.
No.
I think we've got to get back to basics, Pat. It might be an idealistic approach of mine, but that's what we've got to do. When I entered the Senate for the first time in 2016, we were seated up near the Greens, and if the Greens said something, I would call them out. And as soon as I left the chamber, the Nationals and the Liberals would come up and pat me on the back, almost literally, and say, "Good on you." And I would say, "Why aren't you doing it?" Because the Greens sit up the back like 10 gods. And they're fawned upon by everyone. They're despised by everyone, including the Labor Party, aren't they, Alex? They're despised by everyone. They're the most destructive force in Australian politics, but everyone kowtows to them because they've got an effective way of communicating. What we have to do is meet these people head on because they're destroying our country. They're destroying it morally. They're destroying our kids. They're anti-environment. They're anti-science. They're anti-human. They're anti-development. They're anti-industry. They're anti-community. They're anti-gay because they're so strongly blinded by the Islamic approach that they don't realise the Islam destroys gays. They're anti-women. They're anti-family. They're anti-Christian. They're anti-Australian, and they've got to be called out. They're the ones who are putting the pressure on politically to rouse the masses to say we need all this rubbish. But what they're doing is they're actually weakening the population because the moment you have to protect people, Pat, if you insult me, that tells me about you, not about me.
Absolutely.
And we're destroying people's sense of responsibility and our strength. We're destroying people's character in this country by listening to this rubbish. We should be standing up to it.
Gentlemen, we've got about 8-9 minutes, and I want to promote our rallies, by the way. This Sunday we're going to be at Caloundra. We've got 2 sessions, 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock. It's going to be absolutely jam-packed out. We've got people registering that. And then the Gold Coast the following week on the Sunday and Monday. And I believe you're going to be up in the Gold Coast on Thursday night, my son-in-law tells me. So I'll be up there on Thursday night cheering you on there, Malcolm.
We'll be at the Gold Coast on Saturday as well at Broadbeach, I think. Broadbeach with the rally there. Organised by 2 different groups.
We've got to sneak Alex over there. We can get him in still. We can still get him into Queensland
You crossed the border yet? I don't know.
I think I'll come meet you at the airport, mate.
All right. Thanks, Pat.
Well, this is how crazy it is, Alex. We've got, I think, 7,000 Queenslanders south of the border not allowed in, and they can't come home. Now Palaszczuk has told them, drive to Sydney, catch a flight, and then you'll be home. But think about that. When they land when you land in Brisbane, you have to get a taxi or public transport home. So you're meeting other people. When you drive from New South Wales, you can fill up with fuel in, say, Lismore, and drive all the way to your home in Brisbane, and not talk to anyone, not touch anyone. What's safer?
It sounds like that's come straight out of a Queensland Health boardroom to me. That sounds like,
These people, one guy was telling us we're going to meet them on tomorrow at the Gold Coast on the border there, Pat. But one person, it's cost him $15,000 so far in accommodation. I mean, it's just insane.
And then yesterday, Palaszczuk and Miles were falling over each other like the Goon Show over that $150 COVID thing on the news. It was a joke. I actually think they don't. I think they make it up as they go. But look. Can you both give us some hope? What can people do now about their jobs? What can they do? I was supposed to go for a procedure the other day at a local hospital here on the Gold Coast. They called me up and said, Pat, we having technical skills. I said, no, you're not. You're having staff skills because you don't have enough staff. They admitted it to me. Yes, people have quit. Nurses have quit. What hope can you? I want to end on a positive. What hope can you give people? And by the way, we're praying for our Indigenous people. I don't have time to get into all that right now, but we are praying and we're believing, and our love goes out to our Indigenous people. And I'm trying to separate what's true and what's not, and so I don't want to deal with that on this thing. We'll deal with it later on. But I want everyone to know we are praying, and I'm doing the best I can. I'm working with some Indigenous leaders on what we can do up there in the Northern Territory. But what hope, what oxygen to the soul can you gentlemen bring to the people here right now?
Well, from my point of view, I'm picking up every stone to try and find something that'll work at federal level. I mean, I think there are things that the Commonwealth Government can do. I think there are things that the Commonwealth Government should do, and I'm working to try and find those. That's really the point of the exercise. You might have picked up that I've indicated to the government I won't be voting for any government legislation until we do get some greater protection for people. So those wheels are turning. I mean, as I said, it is difficult because these are largely state-driven things, but I think there are some things, we just can't make any promises in there. But I do think that people have got to continue to be loud about this at ground level. I mean, I think the events of last weekend. Yeah. I think, and this is no science in this either, but I think that's starting to really resonate. I mean, the media went to great lengths to not report it. I mean, in our local papers in SA, that would be a front page story if people were being clear about it. It was page 14 in the end. But the social media and people like yourself that are doing independent media are getting that word out there. And I think those things are really important. I think the more people that write to their MPs, that make their voice heard, go out to rallies in the meantime, I think the dam is going to break on this.
Yeah. Senator Malcom, I'll get you to say something. And then what I want both of you to, I'm going to make some important statements in a minute. And then I'm going to ask you both just to share something as, if I could use this term respectfully, fathers and big brother to a nation, just off the political thing, just share a word to encourage people's hearts. But Senator Malcom, before I get to that bit, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm agreeing with Alex that there's a lot of hope, a reason for hope, I think. There's a woman I talk with, she's only 33, she's a mother of 3, she's Aboriginal, she's living in Townsville. She was thinking, she just moved from Canberra to Townsville, she's got a new job, and she was told that if she doesn't get injected by the 17th, she's out of a job. And she was thinking, should I compromise my principles and go? And then she said, no, this is not about injection, this is about freedom. I am not taking the injection because it just undermines freedom totally. I have been talking about freedom. She's well-spoken, and she said no. So there are people like that. The Catholic, was it the Archbishop up here, Catholics, said that if you want to stay as a priest, you must get injected.
What is that?
The anger that I felt from a woman at a presentation recently was just, she was spitting chips. She's a strong Catholic. She was just outraged. That is coming to the fore. I think the tide is changing. What I would suggest to people is protest, number one, but do it peacefully, do it respectfully, like everyone so far. The CFMEU, Dan Andrews invoked a go hard, go fast lockdown a few months ago in Melbourne. When they had a couple of hundred cases a day, right? When they had 2,000 cases a day after the CFMEU rank and file, he opened up. I mean, this is, there's no sense to this, because what Dan Andrews is doing, and he's the biggest bully in the country, what he's doing is he's responding to people putting pressure on him. Scott Morrison is doing the same. He's testing the wind with that coffee story the other day. Josh Frydenberg tried to telephone us, or he did telephone one of our senior advisors and was asking for us to support an important bill of his. We said no. And he was very upset. It's getting to them. They're frustrated. So I think if the people put on more pressure, we stand our ground. Alex is going to stand his ground. We are. Jared Rennick will. So I think that there's some leadership in Parliament coming from us. There's some leadership coming from protesters. And I think the other point is what Alex mentioned as well, the media. Stop buying Sky News. Stop buying 2GB. 2GB's turned into a disgraceful propagandist, and Sky News is much the same, even in their night shows. Just go to the independent media, the people telling the truth and spreading the views. Hit them in the pocket. hit them in the vote, in the ballot box, hit them in the electorate office. That's where you've got to go.
All right, now guys, I'm going to get Senator Malcom Roberts and Senator Alex Antic to just give a short thing from their hearts. But I want everyone, two things I want to say. Number one, thank you for joining us today. You all know I'm big on education. And, you know, we've written over 13 books and especially in taking control of your financial world. The reason why I'm free to say the things I say is that I'm not subject to a boss or a denomination or a religious hierarchy or anything like that. I started in ministry, then got into business, and we've created some great resources. And I'm going to ask my team down there in Sydney if they could put up the link where you can go and get a free gift. There's a couple of my books there, and then one of our great teaching series, What Makes a Great Great. Next Wednesday, I have a major webinar on called Money Mind Mastery to help you guys with your mindset. And God knows we need help on our mindset these days. So guys at Damn Good Productions, if you could put that chat in the link. And then also our great Southland gatherings. And they're this Sunday in Caloundra, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock. There's a link here in the chat across all the various platforms. And I know my brother's down there in Sydney, Mitch is doing that. There we go. There's a link there for the prayer and pushback. That's your gift link. Screenshot it if we could put that up again, guys. Sorry, I've got the delay here. So if we could get the gift link up first, and then also the link to the rallies, 2 more rallies or gatherings, as I've been told I've got to call them now. I've got to be careful now. Caloundra 2 and 6 p.m. And then our final one on the Gold Coast, December 5 and 6. That link will be there. Admission is free. You don't need to pay, but you will need to register to be part of that. And hey, avail yourself the gifts. Get to the rally. It's got a great music team there. And we had a great time in South Australia. Even greater time in the great place of Bow Desert. So I'd love for you all, please show up. 90% of winning this battle is showing up. And be there at the rallies, Caloundra, and then on the Gold Coast, 5th and 6th. If you're a church leader, pastor, bring your congregations along. Hey, you may not even be a believer. We don't care. We're here for freedom. It's not about religion. It's about freedom and about winning our nation back. This is the great Southland. Never forget that. This is the great Southland. We're going to make this nation greater than it's ever been. And you know what? Out of every dark time, it's always dark before the dawn. And I want just to speak encouragement to you. Senator Malcom, maybe you speak to us, give us a word of encouragement, and then we'll hand it over to Alex and we'll close up today.
Well, I just want to emphasize your point about freedom. That's what it is all about. That's what it's been about the whole time. Secondly, I'm very, very pro-human. I know there's something bigger than humans, but we're of the universe, not part of the universe. We're of the universe, and we are the universe. So remember, it doesn't matter whether your skin is black or you've got black hair like Alex, or you've got grey hair like mine, or no hair like Pat. You know, we have all got red blood. Doesn't matter what your skin color is, red blood. Secondly, we've all got the same spirit flowing through us. We just have to tap into that. And the third thing is to remember that every single human has the same universal human needs: freedom, belonging, care, understanding, being heard. These are the things that unite us. There's so much more to unite us, but above all, it comes back to your message, Pat. Support these rallies that Pat is organizing, and remember, the goal is freedom.
Yep. Alex?
Yeah, well said. I liked your point about it's always darkest before the dawn. I think one of the things that's been really, really noticeable in the last 2 years, I think, has been that Australians went out and tried to do the right thing. I think we were asked to do that, and they did. But what we've seen over the last little period, I think, is Australians saying, you know what, we miss our freedom, we want it back. And, you know, I think, as I said, I think that movement is growing, and that has been so encouraging to me. I mean, you know, I was there on Saturday talking to people from Eastern Europe, and it's so funny how that happens all the time because, of course, my lineage is from there as well. I remember my grandma talking. She would be livid at the moment, by the way, about some of this stuff, but she was still with us. But you know, saying, I'm worried about the things I'm seeing. I've seen these before. I think the fact that Aussies have made that association, and I think that the fact that they've come out and flying that flag, you know, the flag of freedom, I think has been so important, and it's so heartening for me. People contact, I'm sure they do, I know they do, to Malcolm as well, but we would all get correspondence, which just really gladdens your heart to know that people are there and they still believe in the things that we've believed in post-war. That beating heart is still there, and we're going to see it rise again.
We are.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Alex, and thank you, Senator Malcolm. Thank you both. I know you're both busy men, and let's do it again. And I'm working on a great prayer and pushback with Nick Wojcik from America, the guy without the arms and the limbs, and got a few very special surprises. We're just trying to schedule that, but we've got to have you both back on. Thank you so much for your time. Guys, get to that link, the gift link, if Mitch could put that up again, and also the rally link. Bring your family, bring your kids. They're going to enjoy it. I promise I'll make the kids laugh. It won't be a boring talk, I can assure you of that. Senator Malcom Roberts, Senator Alex Antic, thank you so much for your time, and God bless you both. Thanks for what you're doing for the country.
And thank you for what you're doing, Pat.
Thanks,
Pat. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Pat.